create our next view, okay? Let's come here and say new file, okay? SwiftUI view, and we're going to call this dashboard view, okay? What are we creating? Before we can move in, we're creating this area here, but we're not creating this crappy not working version. We're creating a good working version, okay? So we're going to be creating a version that actually has a working pie chart. That's the real difference here, okay? So let's go ahead and get started on this dashboard view. Come here and say dashboard view. Just gonna look at it as we go along. So like I said, I did work on this a little bit on my own, so we don't start from scratch entirely. So first things first, let's add our global environment. So environment object var env type global environment. Voila, we can use it. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come here and create a vstack. Okay. Inside that vstack, I'm going to create my hstack, and I'm going to write text inside of there. Dashboard dot font dot system. Okay. I'm going to use size 30, weight of dot bold, and design of dot default. Okay, and I'm going to put a spacer right underneath that. All right, and you might say, Chris, well, why didn't you just use left alignment, right? Why didn't you just create this vstack and say, hey, alignment? Technically, we say leading for left if you are using English, okay, or any language that is left to right. It's leading, but I don't like leading because I want to make sure that this actually goes to the left, okay? And in addition, everything inside of here will then be bound to the leading. I want most things in here to be bound to the center, but this specific thing to be on the left-hand side, okay? That's why I chose to do what I did. So that's that. The next thing I want to add here is going to be a vstack. Okay, and so I don't forget all the other junk that's going to go along with it, we'll add padding. We will add a background of dgray dot opacity of 50% and a corner radius of 10. Underneath, I will put a spacer that'll shove everything to the top because we're in a vstack, and then I'm going to put padding on the actual dashboard, and I'm going to give the actual dashboard, a background of DDD gray. All right. Now inside of this vstack, we want to add some thingies. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So the first thing I want to add in here is an hstack. Same principle as the one on top. All I'm going to do is come here and say, actually, we're going to add a text, okay? And it's going to say, we're going to add two texts. First one will say 0, 0, 0, okay? And then I'm going to say dot font. Honestly, I'm going to do some copy and paste here. You can pause and do the copy and paste, or while I'm talking, you can do it. And I just copy and pasted a simple little thing here. I said, I want to have an hstack with text of this time, okay, 0, 0, 0, and I want this font, and I want to add another text next to it that says log today, and you can say dot font blah blah blah. Now you may be wondering, excuse me, what the heck is the point of saying add text, right? Well, the reason, why didn't I just say text and then just do this? Like, why didn't I do that? That's like almost the same thing. You know, worst case scenario, if you're really knowledgeable and you're really nitpicky, you'll know that the only difference is that there's default spacing. But technically, I could have just said that. If I do that, it's the same thing as saying this. So why wouldn't I just do that? Well, the reason I wouldn't do that is because when you actually add text together, imagine I had this text as a black text, this one as a green text. And then I were to create a very long black text and a very long green text and a very long blue text, and you wanted the text to wrap, but you also wanted some of the text to be blue, some red, some green. It's actually very similar to what used to be attributed strings in UIKit, and it lets you do different custom strings and add them together, and that lets you essentially create customized text. Okay, so that's why I chose to do it the way I did. That's why we did this plus here, okay? And now you should be all caught up. We'll do spacer. All right, and then the next thing we want to put underneath here is another H stack. Alrighty. Actually, before we get ahead of ourselves, let us instead first talk about a very important function. This is too static. We don't want it to say text 0, 0, 0, right? We should make sure all the streaming is going well. Streaming looks good. If you guys have any questions, don't forget you can always write them out, okay? I'm happy to answer any questions. I just haven't had any so far. So if you, or even your thoughts, let me know if I'm going too fast or anything, love to engage with you guys. So let's talk about a very important function here. I don't want it to say 0, 0, 0, right? We have some actual logic we need to put in here. So let's go here and say new file. You guys are probably sick of all these new files. And on a project this small, does it really make sense? Not yet, but it will soon. When you have a ton of stuff going on, I read somewhere that you don't want more than like 300 lines of code on a file. I mean, I personally, I think it's personal preference. It's whatever you're comfortable with. But I think that parsing things up is important, especially as something grows. So I'm going to create a folder called logic. I'm going to put functions inside of there. I'm going to go ahead and put our classes folder inside of there. Heck, I might even put universal inside of there. Okay, and then I'm going to go here into this new functions one that we haven't done anything with yet. And I'm going to add some functions. We're going to create two functions together. Okay, the first one is pretty darn straightforward. Okay, looks like the reverse of something else we made. I said, hey, I want you to convert seconds, and I'm creating a function called seconds to hours, minutes, seconds. And it should receive an integer, which should, if you're using this properly, represent seconds, and the output should be a string. All right? So what I'm saying is, I want to be able to feed a string, and I want to get out, the string version of however many hours, minutes, and seconds that number of seconds are represented. So for example, if I were to feed it, let's just come up with a number like 3674, okay? If I said, oh, run 3674, well, this function should end up spitting back to me 3 different strings. It should spit out 3674. If you divide that into hours, minutes, and seconds, should be that should technically be 1 hour. That should be 1 hour, 1 minute, and 14 seconds, right? But that's not what I'm expecting this thing to give back to me, right? What I'm actually expecting it to spit back to me is 1 hour, and then I should expect 1 and 14. That's what I'm asking it to do. That's what I'm asking this function to do. So let's go ahead and look at it. I'm saying, hey, take the seconds, and I want you to formulate how many hours I can get out of it, okay? And so what it'll do is it'll say, let's pretend we have this example again. It'll say, hey, 3674 divided by 3600 is equal to 1 point blah, 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 blah. But this is an int. Int does not care about point blah, 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 blah. All it cares about is everything before the decimal. So if it's 1.99999, doesn't matter. This is 1, okay? And the next one is minutes. So the next one we're saying is, hey, why don't you take, you see, what's the difference between this and this, right? Well, this is divided by, this is a remainder, okay? So we're saying, hey, go ahead and take this number, divide it by 3600 and give us the remainder, and divide that by 60, okay? So technically, this is the, if I were just to take this, and I said m is equal to just this, that's gonna result in 74, right? So if I were to feed that into here, right? But I say, hey, divide 74 by 60, and of course that's gonna be 1 point blah, 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 blah. It doesn't care about it. It says that is 1 minute. And then I'm gonna do the same thing once more. I'm gonna take that 74, and I'm gonna say, by the way, remember that remainder you didn't care about? Why don't you give me that remainder? And that remainder is going to be the number of seconds. And that's how this works. That's what you're reading here. That's why you have divided, then you have remainder divided, and you have remainder, okay? And then I want to turn that into strings. So if you don't know what a ternary operator is, this is a ternary operator. Let's see how we're doing. All right, we're not losing people. So ternary operators, very simple concept. I don't know if it's worth spending time on, but let's just go ahead. We'll do very briefly in 1 second, okay? Ternary operator, if you see something that says blah, and then it says question mark, blah, and then colon, blah. What it's really saying is I need some sort of comparison. Like for instance, 1 equals 0, question mark. It's like, hey, can you double check, sorry, 1 equals. It's like, hey, can you double check that this is true? If this item on the left-hand side of the question mark is true, then return, maybe, let's say, return color.blue or whatever. Return something. And if it's false, return color.green. Okay? Why does that matter? What we're saying is, hey, let hString equal, first check, is the hours less than 10? If so, that means it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then I want you to go ahead and write, give us back a string that is 0 followed by that number. So if it's 1, then it'll be 0, 1. Okay? Otherwise, if it's 10 or greater, then you can go ahead and just give me that number as a string. That's because I want 10 to appear like this, but I also want 1 to appear like this. I do not want this. That's not my goal. I want this. So that's just some formatting, okay? Using ternary operators to keep it slim. And then, of course, I'll return that. Okay, you'll see what I'm expecting to return. You'll see what I get to return. Boom, nice. Okay, now I'll go here and create a second function. Seconds to full string, right? So seconds, int, okay. And then string. This one is really plain and simple. What I'm trying to do, I'm actually going to, this function will utilize this function. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, simply put, just return this. So imagine I wanted this. Here we go. Then plus this. This, right? Except I don't want something so static that's just 0, 0, 0, right? What I really wanted was, I wanted you to do seconds to hours, minutes, seconds, and I wanted you to use seconds. So I wanted you, make sure we didn't mess anything up. Oh yeah, yeah, right. And then I wanted .0. Okay? So save it and run it. Let's see what it says to us. Should not give us any problems. Okay, so what I'm saying is, hey, instead of giving us, instead of just saying 0, what I want you to do is I want you to feed the seconds, I want you to run through this function and put the hour string here, the 0 with elements, right? And of course I can come here, just copy that, get rid of this one, paste it again. The first one should be .0, the second one should be .1, the last one should be .2. That's how we get the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. Save it, that function is good to go. All of that just to go over to dashboard. And now, for our dashboard, we need to come here and say, remember we had this? Wrong. We wanted this. We wanted to say seconds to full string self .env .clocks .sum all clocks. Okay? If you have followed this far, major kudos, because we have gone through a lot of stuff, and we have gone through the nuance of a lot of stuff that if you don't do full tutorials like this, you're not going to learn. And you're only going to learn in piecemeal, but that's not the best way to learn. So the reason I'm telling you that is because we're about to get into another really good concept, which is extensions. Okay, so you don't actually have this function called sum all clocks, right? Well, we're about to create it. Okay, so just make sure we haven't lost anyone. All right, everyone is doing great. We still got a great chat. Let's go ahead and talk about this this idea of extensions. And you might know extensions, but one thing that took me forever to learn was, what if I want to extend an array? Like, what if I want to create a function for an array that adds all the integers because it's an array of integers? Well, I can't create a universal function that's just sum, because what if I have an array of strings? How can I add those, right? They can't be added the same way that you can add integers. So it's not the same, right? So that leads us to a very good thing. Let's go here and say new file, and I'm going to create it called extensions. Okay? And we are reaching the end of my goal for the day, okay? We might end up having to do this. So by the end of today, I'd like to at least get us pretty far into creating this app. Realistically, I'll probably do this again in 1 week. So next Wednesday at the same exact time, 6:15 Eastern, I want to do this exact same thing, okay? And we'll keep going. We're going to finish building this app. Eventually, I want to start implementing core data so you can save the stuff, user defaults so you can save logins. I want to implement Firebase so you can have this stuff on the cloud. And then eventually, if this gains enough traction, I'm happy to create an iPhone version of this app, because in an ideal world, I could start tracking on my phone, maybe end it on my computer. So just so you know what you're watching, what you're getting yourself into, this should be a very comprehensive example of how to create robust application, okay? So import SwiftUI. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the extensions that we need to create. Okay, this extension, we need to extend arrays, right? But we don't want to extend every array. We don't want every array to have access to these functions we're creating. I specifically want to create an array or an extension for arrays where the items inside are clocks, okay? So I want to create a function called SumAllClocks, okay? And I want to be able to feed it a reference date. It should be of type date, and if I don't give it one, I want to give it a default value of date. Okay, you'll understand why in a moment. And I want it to feed, or to spit back out an integer. Okay, so I'll create a new variable called sum. It's equal to 0. Then I'll run for each clock inside of the array. So for each clock in self, because self is the array, not the element, but clock would be the element. Okay, what I want to do is first I'm going to come here and say return sum. For each clock, I want to go ahead and say sum is going to be equal to the sum plus the clock dot time segments dot sum all segments, and then ref date, and then you'll say, wait, Chris, what the heck is sum all segments? Where did we even get sum all segments? We just created sum all clocks. Very easy answer. A new extension. Okay, it's the last extension we're gonna do today. Okay. I know you guys are probably getting sick of this. We're doing great though. But where element is equal to time segment. Okay? We'll say func sum all segments, and we're gonna have it take a ref date as well. Date. Okay. And it should spit out an int as well, and it'll look very similar. Sum is equal to 0. Okay, for seg in self, sum is equal to sum plus seg dot elapsed time, which lucky for you, we've already created. We don't have to go create that again. And we'll feed it the date, and we'll return the sum. And that should get rid of our error. Okay, so I'll come here, save it, and I'll run it. Okay, we should not get any errors right now. Lovely. No errors, right? So let's go back over to dashboard. All of this just to create dashboards. You're probably wondering, why did we do that? Now we've started working on dashboard, and what I want to do is I want to take dashboard view. If you remember, I'm gonna copy dashboard view, and I'm gonna go over to our content view. And remember, we had right here we had vstack text B. Let's get rid of that. Got something good now. Dashboard view. Boom. Save. Run. I'm not telling you you're going to get a lot out of it, but you're not going to get nothing out of it, okay? Dashboard view. We're starting to get something of quality here, okay? Now, let's go back over to dashboard view, okay? And the next thing I need to do, so just so we don't lose track of what we have only a few more things to do today, okay? Just a very few more things. So I'm going to go ahead, give me just 1 second. You guys take a quick second to catch up. I'm just going to write something down for myself so we don't lose track of what we have left today. Okay? Give me just 1 second, we'll get started. We'll get back on in just half a second. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. All right. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come here to the VStack Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to go to right here. Where did we have it? In reusable views. Go to your sidebar clock label. Okay, we didn't do something important yet. So if you remember in the one that I created in advance, I can click here and start a clock, right? Look at that, the clock is moving, right? Okay, I can close it, stops moving, okay? So we need to do that, right? So that's gonna be the sidebar clock label. Go ahead and take your HStack that had everything in it, okay? I want you to take the whole thing and fold it up. You're gonna take that whole thing and you're gonna put it inside of a, let's go on top of it, put a button, okay? I'm gonna take the whole thing and bring it over. Oopsie, there we go. Button. You're gonna have to add an extra curly bracket there and make sure that you go up top and create an action. Okay? What do we want to do in here? Well, what we need to do is every time we click it, we need to activate a clock or inactivate the clock if we're already using that clock, or inactivate the one we're using and switch to a new one if we clicked one that other than the one that we're currently using. So let's go ahead and start adding that logic in here. So we're going to start by saying if self.env.publicTimer.isValid is equal to false, then we need to do some stuff. So first thing we're saying is, hey, if the current public timer is not valid, then we're not looking at a clock. Let's get started. Let's look at a clock, right? So we'll say self.env.publicTimer. I'm sorry. I apologize. We'll say self.env.activateClock, and it'll say, remember, we spent all this time preparing ourselves for this moment, so we're now watching everything come together. We'll say, oh yeah, which clock do I want to activate? You bet it. I want to activate clock, which, as you know, this guy is defined right here, okay? And then underneath that, I'll say self.env.publicTimer is going to be equal, and now here's where it gets fun. I can say scheduled timer. I can do something on a regular interval. So I'll say, well, how often do I want to do it? I want to do it at a time interval of 1. And do I want this item to repeat? You better believe I do, right? And then if I want to reference the timer, which I don't, I could have referred to it by changing this to say like timer or whatever, like T, okay? And then I'm going to come here and say self.env.publicDate equal to date, okay? I don't actually need to reference the timer. I'm just going to go ahead and do that because I don't want it. Now, what are we doing? This simply says, hey, you're activating a clock. Boom, let's go ahead and set the public timer equal to a scheduled timer that on an interval of 1, this is 1 second, okay? Every 1 second, repeating, I want to set the public date equal to date, okay? Meaning that we need to every second we're going to make sure that the public date inside of the global environment is always equal to the current date, okay? That's all that is. And then we'll come here and say else, and what is this else? Remember, the if said, hey, do we have a valid timer? No, we don't. Boom, let's get started. The next one says, hey, what if we do have a valid timer, okay? Well, let's just start by saying, if we do have a valid timer, then what if we clicked on the old clock, right? Well, then I come here and say self.env.inactivate_clock. We'll just come here and say self.env.publicTimer.invalidate, and of course it's asking me, hey, which clock would you like to invalidate? Frankly, it doesn't actually matter. Let's go ahead and just do that, and let's go. We shouldn't have had that in there, so let's go ahead and find the inactivate clock function. I don't need that in there. I don't need this. Get rid of that. We don't want that. Save. Okay. And yeah, that's just making sure that's right. So now when I go back, it should not be asking us for a parameter. So save and run. And you should see that now, when I click on a clock, look at that. We've actually started that clock. We don't have a feedback in real time here yet, but we'll take care of that. Also, our UI is messed up. We'll fix that in just a moment, okay? So we'll stop it. Boom, clock stopped. But what if I come here, I start the clock, and I click here? Ideally, that should stop this one and then start this one, right? So that's really easy to do though. So all we have to do is come here and say, instead of just saying, oh yeah, if a timer is valid, aka we're in this portion of the else, instead of just saying, oh, inactivate it. No, that's not what we want to do. What we want to do instead is we want to say, hey, first check, is the active clock equal to this clock? And if the active clock is not equal to the clock that I just clicked, okay, then we'll do something. If it is equal, meaning I'm just trying to turn off the clock that I already turned on, then go ahead and do that routine we just created. But if we're clicking a different clock, then we'll come here and say, hey, you know what? In that case, inactivate clock. Go ahead and inactivate the one we're working on, the one that was running. And we'll say self.env.public timer. You can inactivate or invalidate that timer as well, aka stop doing this repeating thing. Okay. While we're waiting here, what we want to do is we want to come here and say, hey, self.env.activate clock. Which clock do we want to activate? The new one, the one we just clicked on, right? Okay, and then now that we've activated that clock, right? Actually, we're not going to use printing. I'm not going to do that for now. We'll just say, hey, you know what? Now that we activated the new clock, go ahead and self.env.public timer. We're doing the same thing. Copy and paste. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? All right, and that's it. We just said, hey, stop the old one, start the new one, right? And of course, this is a button that we don't want it to be ugly, so let's get rid of ugly buttons. Just come here and say .button style plain button style. Nice. All right, save it, run it. Okay. Let's go ahead and run it. Look at that, that's changing, right? I'm gonna stop that for a second. Let's get some real feedback. Like, we spent all this time to do this. Let's go ahead and get some real feedback, right? So let's come here and say, I don't want it to be 0, 0, 0, 0. What I want it to be is, I'm gonna come here and say clock, okay, dot, I'm gonna go over to, we're gonna use time segments dot get. If I remember the function name correctly, I wish I had autocomplete right now, but for some reason it's not working, so I'll just do sum all segments. Okay. Sum all segments, okay, and then ref date. Well, what I want my ref date to be, I don't want it to be the default date. I want it to update in real time, meaning that I want to come here and say ref date is going to be equal to self.env.public date. Okay, and it's going to say, whoa, 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 text needs to have a string. You are not giving me a string, right? So I'll say you are correct. I'm going to come here and grab this. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to save it for a second. I just pasted it and then I commented it out. I'm going to say what I really wanted to do is I'm going to go to dashboard where we had taken the time to make this. Seconds to full string. Okay, I'm going to copy that over. And I'm going to go over to sidebar. I'm going to paste that right in here. Yeah, I had one too many with me. Okay, and instead of saying, oh, seconds full string of self.env.clocks, sum all clocks, blah, 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 it's not what I'm looking for. What I'm really looking for, actually, is I want this one. I want clock.timesegments.sum all segments, because I just want the sum of segments for this specific clock. So save, run, boom. And this should do the trick. I actually have not tried this before trying this right now, but it should work. So look at that. It's working, right? Now if I stop it, it stopped. Now if I click on this one should be bumping up. And this one should not change, and this one should be the sum. Sure enough, here it is working. Okay? And let's even do ourselves another favor. Let's make this like really, really nice, okay? this foreground color, let's go ahead and make this, we'll come here and say foreground color. Instead of clock.color, let's use a ternary operator. We'll say, hey, self.env.activeClock is equal to clock. And we're asking ourselves, is that true or not? And if it is, then it's gonna be clock.color. But if it's not, we're gonna do dark gray. Now let's see what it does. Look at that. Now we got something a little more responsive, right?